Welcome to this webinar on enhancing cash forecasting with AI. My name is Marielle Barkley, and I am the editor of this award-winning Global Treasury Leaders Program, which is organized by The Economist and sponsored by Deutsche Bank. The program's objective is to share thought leadership and to connect treasurers around the world. And we do this through a series of activities every year, which include summits in different regions. I'm working on the next one, which will be in Singapore in November. Webinars like this one you're joining today, white papers, interviews, and an online community where we host these webinars. The community is open to corporates only, and this allows treasurers from all over the world to connect and to exchange ideas on any topic of their interest. It is totally free for corporates. There are no suppliers of anything, banks or technology companies allowed. And I am now going to send you a link via the chat facility so that you can join if you would like to. Just remember to choose the Global Treasury Leaders Network when asked what groups you would like to join, because feel free to join as many as you like, but the main thing is for this group is Global Treasury Leaders Network. But going back to today's webinar, the idea is to make this session as interactive as possible. So please ask as many questions as you would like using the questions tab in the Q&A. Send them as soon as you think of them, otherwise you will forget. We will bring them up when appropriate. Without further ado, please let me introduce today's webinar's chair, James Kelly, who is Senior Vice President, Treasury, Risk Management and Insurance at Pearson's and an expert in AI. With that, James, please, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Marielle. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us. We've got a really interesting panel. I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have over the next 50 minutes or so. As Marielle said, please do send us your questions. And I'm going to pass over to the panel to firstly ask the first question to Gleason to introduce himself and then tell us a little bit of the story of his implementation of AI in AP and AR.
Sure, thanks, James. My name is Gleason Ngito. I'm the Director of Treasury for Konica Minolta. Based in the US here, we're about 20 miles away from New York City. The implementation of AI cash management, cash forecasting actually began about a year and a half ago. However, preceding that, we started our journey in digital transformation for the entire finance group. That includes AP, AR, accounting, as well as treasury and FP&A. This is a strategy that Konica Minolta took both externally for our customers to digitize our products, as well as to digitize our capabilities internally, especially in the finance area. Treasury was one of the areas that we've automated and using AI technology. Prior to that, however, we started off first with order to cash, AR, in other words, credit and collections, AI, and then finally, subsequently to that, Treasury implemented cash management, cash forecasting. We subsequently followed that up with accounting, and that is more in the area of R2R or bank reconciliation, where AI is used at a lower level in terms of rules-based technology. And all of this was accomplished with our partner that we've worked with since the beginning 2.5 years ago.
That's excellent. And that brings us on to, I'm going to ask, we've got a couple of poll questions to go through during the course of this session. And so I'm going to bring up the first poll, which is about use of AI tools. So could I prompt the Eurofinance team to bring that up? Fabulous. And while you answer this question, I'm going to give you a little bit of trivia knowledge. I was curious about why a pole is called a pole, and it comes from, so the word pole comes from the word head in Middle Ages English. So it was a count of heads, and so when we talk about doing a poll, it's actually a count of heads. So we'll just give people a few more seconds to react to that, and then we'll see what the answers are. Excellent.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the poll.
Fabulous. Oh, there we go. So roughly a third of people say yes, and 2/3 of people say no. That's interesting. So we're going to go on to the second question, which is related, and this is about whether security is a concern for you with AI. And so again, could I ask the Eurofinance team to bring this one up? I feel very much like a magician here. Here is the next trick. Do cybersecurity concerns prevent you from implementing AI? And again, my interesting trivia fact, the word security comes from securitas, which is a Latin word, which effectively means to be carefree. So cura means care, and se means free. So the idea of being secure is to be carefree. There we go, and we'll just do a few more seconds to wrap up those responses, and we'll see what comes back. Interesting, about 50-50. So interesting. Excellent. Okay, so Jesper, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of your journey?
Certainly, thank you, James, and thank you, Mariel, for inviting. Very, very topical thing to talk about these days. My name is Jesper Broskov. I am the group treasurer for the Lego Group. I've been with the company for almost 14 years, and before that, I did a bit of time in banking and in the energy sector, but went back to childhood in the Lego Group. For those who doesn't know, is a small toy company in the western part of Denmark, making plastic bricks in essence. So the journey our team has been on. Let me start. Let's take the starting point is that we are very fortunate in the Lego Group that we only have one ERP platform, which is SAP. Even though it's an old version of SAP, not S/4HANA, as many of you probably have already evolved to. And we don't do a lot of mergers and acquisitions. So all legal entities are on the same platform. So all information registered in any legal entities are available real time in the same ERP platform. So that gives us quite a good base. And for years we were actually quite happy with the situation because we had all data in one system, and we could perhaps the system was not the best at displaying cash forecast data, but it was easy to take this data out of SAP and into the good old green-white spreadsheet. And this is how we honestly have managed cash for 10 years at least. But then we started kind of looking at, okay, well, what's the next level here, and how can we improve? How can we start looking at machine learning, AI? How can we be better at explaining deviations? And we found the challenge was we actually had a lot of data in spreadsheets for 10 years. However, we could not really use that data for anything. We hired in several consultants and said, well, can you do something? Can you create a machine, a program that can learn from all this data? And that was not really possible. So we took a journey and said, okay, what is it we really need? We need data analytics. So we went out and procured a data analytics tool and start building the interface to actually use, which I think is a good data platform, our EEP system, and transferring the data into this system or environment, which is more a data analytics tool, which includes some AI machine learning functionalities, which we are now exploring step by step. So that's probably where we are now, slowly exploring. And perhaps one of the first lessons is that it's not easy to do AI or machine learning on everything at once. It's easier to take different cash flow streams at the time and start applying this new technology.
That's excellent. And so if I go to Gleason, do you want to talk a little bit about the journey that you've been on and how things progressed?
Yeah, sure. With our fintech partner, we knew internally we didn't have the resources on the IT side, knowledge of AI algorithms and other types of tools such as Python or other to develop algorithms. So we searched for, with the consultant, we searched for a partner, although I knew of that partner being part of the treasury conferences around the world, especially in the US, and knew of their existence and what they were focusing on. So we felt, since our tools that we were using is pretty much like Jesper, Excel based, the forecasting that we did in treasury was very manually based for the past 5 years, to be more specific, where we were stratifying our cash flows in different categories, the cash flow categories, as we call it. And we were growing in scale in terms of volume, so it became harder and harder to manage the cash forecasting and the quick turnaround. So we knew we had to improve on the automation of capturing historical data and also the forecast itself and making those predictions both on a 13-week basis, even on a weekly and daily basis we would go, and certainly up to even 13 months for our credit facility sizing that we have at Konica Minolta in the US. So we knew of this partner. We decided to work with that partner after a bid process with other treasury workstation providers that are offering machine learning, supposed machine learning, but it wasn't what we expected, what we wanted in that arena. We were more focused on a more customized solution that only a flexible and very agile company can provide us, such as a fintech partner. And we first started with the project order to cash, where we improved our cash application process by automating straight through processing from 3% to about 85%. So that obviously reduced the time of our AR department to process transactions from our customers coming in. In addition to that, for order to cash, we loaded our AR data into the platform of our fintech partner. We're using SAP, and SAP S/4HANA data is very, of course, condensed, and that information we felt needed to be passed on in order to improve our predictive analytics in the area of collections. And then subsequent to that, we built on more and more functionality, including importing on a daily basis any customer data, as well as any eventually the AP data that we wanted to bring into the platform. So it was a very progressive process where we felt that not only bank data could help with our cash forecasting when we finally implemented cash forecasting about a year and a half ago, along with cash management, we felt we had to bring an integration with the data that is in our S/4HANA system for both on the AP and the AR side. We loaded actually probably about 1 year's worth of SAP data on the accounts payable side and about 6 months of AR data, specifically open invoices that we've had through the 180 days. That data we felt can be used with our partner to improve our cash forecasting, which we eventually saw the benefits of that coming on probably about 5 months after the final implementation and the go live. So it was a very progressive process. I think we made small hits, or we had low-hanging fruit, and from that low-hanging fruit, we capitalized on a more medium-term solution, and then eventually that progressed into the benefits that we feel we're generating for the last year and a half with all the different types of AI technology that's being used in different areas of our finance department at this point.
That's really great, and we'll come back to your story a little bit later on, because I think there's some really interesting pieces to pull out here, particularly around that kind of incremental journey. But if I pull out a few of the themes that you've talked about, it's the challenges around creating scale, choosing the right areas to deploy things like machine learning, making sure that the underlying data is right, and that kind of initial push of having kind of manual processes, meaning that a lot of these things were quite difficult if you needed to achieve scale, etc. I think there's some really interesting story points in there. So I'm going to hand over for the final Eurofinance poll. So hopefully my colleagues can bring this one up, and this is around understanding within the audience to help us as we have this discussion. What are the key challenges that you see in your businesses around forecasting, particularly cash forecasting? And again, forecast comes from the Middle English, meaning to plan ahead. Cast being a future cast. What do things look like in the future? Excellent. We'll just give it a few more seconds for the last answers to come in. Excellent. So we've got quite a spread. Roughly 1 in 3 people saying it's a bit of everything. 1 in 3 saying it's data, and then a bit of predictability and organizational engagement. So thank you. And I think if we move to Claudia for your introduction, if you'd like to introduce yourself and then talk a little bit about your experience in your role, and perhaps how some of these poll results might echo with your experience.
Thank you, James. My name is Claudia Villasis Valraf. I am the head of data-driven treasury at Deutsche Bank, based in London. And I have been trying to solve for the cash flow forecasting challenge since 2012. I started doing it in a corporate. Then I moved into a fintech, and now I am trying to do that in a bank. So I am trying to help clients in their journey to become a data-driven treasury. So the interesting fact that I have discovered throughout the years is that everybody believes that somebody else can help. So when you are in a corporate, you are having the challenge that you don't have access to the data because your data is totally segregated. There are very few companies like Jaspers that have one single SAP. And even going into SAP, it's challenging to have the budgets to download and get all the information and all the data out of the machine. Then you move into a fintech, and the challenge you have is if the clients lend you the data to create models, if they feel safe and data security by working with you. And then you move into the bank, and a general belief, for example, is that that banks have enough information about companies and a lot of data in the bank accounts for many, many years. And many corporates have approached us thinking that because we have all this data, we can create a good forecast for them. We have run some pilots, and what we have discovered is that even though we have all your bank accounts data and we might know you very well, there are many things that we don't know about you. And that alone if we only know what has happened in your bank account, every time we try to make predictions, there are a lot of outliers, and you don't know if the peak came because dividends were paid, or because you paid your loans, or you were borrowing money, or you were funding another entity. All these non-operational cash flows, for us, it's very difficult to understand where they are coming from. So, and basically, the categorization at the end of the transactions, it's what's the challenge. So it's like, as a retail customer, you get the categorization that the current banks are doing currently. But if you order in a marketplace food or a toy for your kid, it doesn't differentiate. It's still shopping and maybe not for food, right? So, or entertainment, it cannot distinguish. The same problem we have with our clients. And without having access to your ERP data, it is very, very difficult for a bank to have something meaningful. Or even if we were to create the best cash flow forecast, because you are giving us an account that has very clean data, very clean transactions, just operational, the challenge is that most companies have more than one cash bank. And I don't know how much it would help you to have a good prediction on, let's say, 20% of your global transactions. That's the experience we have had, yeah. And
so to what extent do you find that, a partnership model between the corporate and the bank can help unlock some of that by information sharing? Does that get you to a point where you're able to start joining the dots and understanding that pattern better?
Actually, I strongly believe that is the way to go. So we need a tool or a champion, a new champion, because it doesn't exist, that has this in mind, bringing efficiency into the ecosystem by combining data. But there are a lot of challenges here, right? So where would the data reside? So we have heard from some corporates, well, we trust the bank because they are already holding a lot of data. Yes, but you wouldn't like us to see how much money you have in every single bank account around the world. And you might not want us to see all your accounts payables and receivables all together. If you think about a fintech, would they be in the position to do that? Well, maybe one of the big tech players might be a good candidate, but usually maybe that hasn't been their business line currently.
It's going to be way too niche for a big player, because the way that you've got to do it is you've got to think about how you anonymize data on both sides. So it takes real care to kind of go through and go, okay, right, neither the bank nor the bank doesn't need to know who all the individual debtors are.
Correct.
The corporate doesn't need to know all of the details from the bank side, and therefore what you've got to create is synthetic data that sits in the middle, that's effectively a proxy for the data that came through from either side.
I believe that
Sorry.
technologically the concept is there. There is an option to get a clean room, right? So I put my models and you bring the data, and I don't see your data, you don't see my IP.
Yep.
So the technology exists, but then we have the internal IT policies of each corporate, where plenty of them don't want to use SaaS solutions, don't want to use cloud solutions, so that they still believe that on premises is the best. So these are some challenges that are difficult to change, or they are only going to change now that AI is getting so prominent. But I believe that for the C-level need to understand all these challenges, stand behind it so that things move. And as long as they don't see the ROI and the potential, the huge potential on making these improvements, it will be difficult to move the needle, because the investments are important. It's for each company to do it individually, and maybe Gleason or Jasper, you can talk about your own experience on putting together the business cases. It is not a cheap project. You need the buy-in from many people in the organization. It breaks a lot of corporate silos. So you need to prove that there is a return on investment on from a function that is traditionally a cost center.
And so that brings me neatly to our construction expert, Jesper Broskov. Would you like to talk to us a little bit about how you built that business case and constructed the Lego cash forecasting project?
I would prefer to talk about the business case for the Lego bricks, but that's okay. That's maybe a little bit off topic. No, so I agree that taking on the whole, let's say, the whole forecast in one go and saying, okay, we need to achieve AI excellence at the end of the project, I think it's a very it's an enormous task to embark on. I actually think if I just step one step back, this whole thing, the AI machine learning technology in treasury, it's a bit, to quote Bill Gates, I think right now we are overestimating the impact in the next 2 years and underestimating the impact it will have in over a 10-year horizon. So we actually said, okay, we know where we know what works and where our limitations is with the current solution. And then we went out and found a, I won't call it small in any way, but found a specific data analytics tool which had kind of a forefront, which was cash forecast, the use for cash forecast. But the strength of the tool, in my opinion, is the data analytics part. So it was a product called CashForce, and internally it's reasonably priced, and we had resources internally in treasury, and we believed that we also were the best. I actually generally prefer to, if I can keep most of the implementation work within my team, because that's also when then where the learnings are harvested in the team. If everything is outsourced to an IT department or a consultant, then afterwards you are sitting and saying, but now there's a red light there. What does that mean? So we took it upon it ourselves, and we made a fairly simple business case where we simply said, okay, this is the cost out of pocket and our own cost, and this is the what we expect to reduce our average cash balance with by getting a better understanding of our cash flows and a better understanding also of where the deviation comes from and some opportunities in terms of predicting cash flows in a better way. And it took us about a year, a bit more than a year to implement, and yeah, we fairly quickly earned back the money, and it's of course difficult to say is it exactly due to that system or not. I have to say I think my biggest return on the investment is that we now embarked on the journey. So we are now thinking about cash forecasting as the cash forecast as data that is actually a tool we can use. So we have started. We first took upon departure in our retail cash flows. So the direct to consumer sales, which is there's no invoice involved. So we are applying some data predictive analysis on that, trying to say, okay, what was the sales on this Tuesday this last year, and are there other factors playing in that can help us predict what this income will be on this Tuesday this year or this month compared. So as I said initially, we have started taking small chunks and applying machine learning AI. But what I really like is that suddenly now we have all our cash forecasting data in an analytics environment. There are different tools in the. I forgot to mention. I call it Cash Force. It has since changed name to Cash Optics. This tool, but it gives us the opportunity to actually now have our data in a more data friendly setting, and we can start job by job starting to learn how to apply these tools. Some is in part of the system, some we might have to actually do the analysis ourselves in somewhere else. But at least now we are taking the step out of the comfort of an ERP system or a TMS system. So I think that's already a good step. Yeah, I think that's maybe that's unless you have any other questions, James.
No, that's excellent. Thank you. I'm loving it. We're going to move on to Gleason because we then move on to a little bit of how does the process work once you've implemented your solutions. I think one of the things that we talked about last week that was really interesting was around how your businesses work to try and achieve the targets that are set and the buy-in that you get around targets. If you'd like to talk a little bit about that, that would be fabulous. Oh, you're muted, Gleason.
Yes, sorry about that. Sure, we looked at it from a holistic point of view, driven by our CFO, who fortunately for us, the time was perfect to engage in this activity for the long term. Although it took us about 2 years to implement all the different modules that we wanted in the system, in the platform. So it was really driven from the top down, as you colloquially always say. Our CFO was highly engaged in the decision that, and the business case, of course, was developed by the different departments, principally led by Treasury, as we tend to look at return on investment and return on capital. The focus, of course, was on time savings for scalability. So that will lead to, of course, will result in automation. Not increasing our staff in the group was very important for both cash application and for our accounting department, as well as for treasury. We have a very lean treasury staff. We only have 3 people, but including myself handling it. So it is really a point in time where we felt that we don't want to grow due to the number of employees. We want to grow our business along with the leveraging off of the technology that will afford us that opportunity and derive that benefit. When we looked at the fintech partner, we looked at their capabilities, of course, of the knowledge of SAP. We felt that, you know, they must have that knowledge as far as the ABAP or the Advanced Business Application Programming underlying the SAP system, and specifically S/4HANA, how to extract that information from our system into the platform. So that was very key in our decision to go with that fintech partner, was again their SAP capability, their knowledge, their configuration, as well as the programming language behind the ERP system. We also felt that bank data is very important. So even before that, we allowed for the visibility of our cash globally to be part of the process, consolidate our bank accounts to basically 5 major banks so that we could focus on those banks and have the data brought into the cash forecasting platform on a daily basis. Along with that, we felt that IT internally may not have the resources to be highly involved in the project. So this partner needed to be basically, we lent our UAT system to allow them to configure it properly. Obviously, that's a test system, so we felt that it was safe enough to make those configurations along with our developers overseeing the whole process. So their time, our internal IT department's time and effort was minimized. I think optimized is a better word, optimize, by not spending too much time on the project where, again, as Claudia mentioned, you know, we're a cost center in finance, so getting projects approved and having that priority for the whole business is very difficult to get approved. And this, by taking the whole picture, the whole benefit that could be derived throughout the finance department was really the key in showing the benefit. So the implementation required full intense meetings that took place on a daily basis. I would say probably at least every other day. It required myself as being part of that team, not only our analysts, but also our AR manager, as well as our accounting managers, as well as the other departments that I'm talking about, AP and all, to be involved when we needed them. If you don't have that in the whole process, then the project will just continue to drag on. You have to have your time frames set up where you expect to go live, you expect to reach this milestone, then the next milestone, and then go live with the different phases. And you get those wins because you're in a highly structured process of the implementation as well as the testing that goes with it. So I would say that probably I grew a lot of gray hairs the last 2 years because of it, because it was a daily, at least 25 to 30% of my time was devoted to the project, not only project managing it, but also working with our fintech partner behind the scenes, outside the meetings, to provide the information they needed to configure the system according to our specifications.
So it's a really big commitment, isn't it? It's one of those things. If you're going to do this properly, it can't be something that you kind of think, I'm going to do this as one of 10 projects. It's got to be something that you commit to as a lead.
Yes, exactly. Excellent.
So I I have a question for Jasper and Gerson. Talking to our clients that are going through this journey moving into AI, a forecast with artificial intelligence compared to a forecast in Excel. So it's like moving from going in a carriage from A to B and going and suddenly having a car. So I believe that the point B at some point is not necessarily having an accurate cash flow forecast, but actually what you do with that, how you make more efficient funding and hedging and investment decisions. But for that, you need to change how you operate, right? Because traditionally you were looking at Excel. So have you been able to change your policies and the way you operate to have this massive amount of information and work with it? And James, sorry, maybe I interrupted your next question.
It's all good.
If I should start, I think you're touching a key point here, the decision. And I think maybe a lot of people on this call, are treasurers, and it is our job to make the right call, to go right or left, to borrow more, borrow less, sell or buy. And I think that you need to be really sure on your data. So you might implement a nice Ferrari and think it looks nice, but at the end of the day, it's important decisions that you make based on the data. So I think that's why it's a difficult jump to go from a lot of bad things are being said about Excel, and I think a lot of TMS and ERP systems are actually today covering some of the Excel space. But I think for me, still it's key that you know exactly that your data is correct, that you can trust the scenario or the predictability analysis 100%, and probably I would prefer a couple of percent more than 100 before I would start to say, okay, let's just jump into to that being in basis. That being said, I like experimenting. So, sometimes maybe having a dual setup in the beginning and say, okay, let's experiment a bit with these kind of new technologies, new functionalities, and learn. But yeah, at least my standing point is at the end of the day, we have to make the right financial decisions. So it's difficult to see a jump from one to the other, but I see more like, let's experiment a bit, let's innovate, let's learn, and in my world, play a bit, and then slowly move towards it. I don't see it as a one plug out, one plug in journey.
Okay. So we've got loads of questions, and broadly speaking, they summarize down to a few groups. And I think, Jesper, to your point about Excel, I think the thing that's attractive about Excel to treasury teams is the attributability of, where the data is coming from, what's happening with it, and you can follow each stage of the process. And I think one of the key challenges, the reason why Excel becomes less ideal the bigger and more complex you get, is that Excel works really well where you've got a relatively linear process that's being repeated, and therefore, there's limited variation. Once you get onto, I've got multiple currencies I've got to deal with, and I've got interplays between them, and I've got lots of different legal entities, that gets more complicated. And so when we have a look at the kind of Q&A that's coming up, one of the big questions here is around data and how that process works. And so, Claudia, I'm going to come to you. There's a great question here about the attribution of targets. So when companies define their budgets, typically at the start of the year, you start with a for the full year, the profit is going to be X and we want our cash flow to be Y. And then you go through and you go, okay, right. And company business A, your target is going to be this. And then business B, your target is going to be this. And then gradually you have to split that down to kind of a cost center level and legal entities and all of that kind of other stuff. There's a great question that was in the Q&A, which was effectively, an FP&A team would do that for the P&L to kind of work out how does this work for a legal entity. How should a finance and particularly a treasury function think about dividing up cash flows and then being able to flow that into other models, things like the 13-week forecast?
That's an interesting question. The first thing that comes to my mind is that many corporates, they try to mix the budgeting process with the forecasting process, and the forecast so one of the main issues is that when without machines, you have people behind forecast. And what you get reported is people that are trying to, of course, tell you what to expect, but at the same time, sometimes they also are trying to fulfill your expectations and be as close to the budget as possible. The sentiment is a challenge that can be corrected by introducing AI, because then you don't have politics or sensibilities in the data. You have pure data, which might not be the right answer, but at least it would be an unbiased prediction. But if what you want to do is to try to compare the budget with what is happening, then you also need more information. So when you are creating your forecast and when you are receiving all your actuals from the bank, one of the challenges that we have seen from clients is the categorization of transactions. So how fast can you attribute a transaction? Can you categorize a transaction into a category that you can compare with your plan and your forecast and your budget? That is something that many of our clients invest a lot of time on, or they are just ignoring it, and it's very difficult to compare. So if you are able to categorize, the theory is, if you are also would be able, by monitoring each line, then you can create predictions on each category independently, and that might help on the beyond 3 months forecast. But as Jasper alluded to, this is a lot of experimenting and a lot of innovation, and there is very little proof that this is possible. Or it might be possible in some industries, but less relevant in others.
Yeah. So moving, a big part of this is about data, and I think is really interesting your comment about you start out with a pure unbiased position. So I'm going to take this to Paul Gleason and ask the question: to what extent, and this is a paraphrase of one of the questions in there, to what extent do your operating companies and your partners believe that the forecast is a pure unbiased position, and to what extent is there debate over these, and are manual adjustments made, and what does that process look like?
Yeah, that's a very good question, leading from Claudia's remarks and comments. There is some manual overrides, I call them, or manual inputs for information that is not being predicted. Let's say acquisitions, or if we feel sales is going to be targeted. And I have the sales forecast obviously coming from me from our sales team. And I still use that to kind of gauge how much our receivables will be, how much of our receivables will be collected the following month, since our terms are typically 30 days with our B2B customers. So I do make some manual adjustments in the system for definitely for one-off events, but also for different types of cash flows that will come in that are non-AR, as well as making adjustments for what they're targeting to be sales from the prior month that will be collected this month, as well as certain percentages in subsequent months based on the buckets that we have in aging. However, I also try to keep a separate cash forecast. I know it's more work, where I'm letting the system calculate the AR accounts receipts, as well as the AP disbursements cash flow disbursements that will occur for subsequent months. Typically, we go 13 weeks, but then we also try to provide a budget, not a budget, but a forecast for 6 months, up to 6 months. So I think, and it has been proven, I would say, for the past 3 months, looking back, and we have these conversations with our fintech partner to provide us how close we are, in addition to us looking at our variance analysis, that overall it's working. I'm still not 100% there, but the AR and AP cash flows are probably at 85 to 90% accurate to what they would have been, if I made manual manipulations to them. If I make manual manipulations or strip out intercompany transactions, which may involve 10% of our transactions on a disbursement and receipts basis, then it's going to be higher than that, closer to 90 to 95%. And that's what we've garnered from working and improving the model as best as we could. We established separate cash flows to stratify or separate those activity from there and really focus on the pure AP and AR cash flows. And that's where our percentages have gone up to that 90 to 95%. But I would say overall, if you look at it, we're probably at 15% cash flow volatility improved our cash flow volatility or reduced it by 15%. And by 20%, our cash forecast has improved in terms of accuracy since the time we went live last November. But that percentage, I believe, will gradually improve as we stratify more of our cash flows from what cannot be necessarily predicted on a recurring basis.
Brilliant.
So that's the approach we've taken. It's a work in progress. You're only going to get small wins here and there. Biases are interjected because sales is saying one figure, but then the open receivables show another. And then payables say, hey, this is it, which is more controllable. We have more influence, obviously, on the payable side. We tend to be more accurate, maybe by a couple more percentage points, not that much on disbursements. But customer behavior is very unpredictable, and sales is different as well.
It's the classic situation of the more you discover that you didn't know.
Yeah, exactly.
The conversations with the different participants is more efficient, right? Because you have more information.
Yes. Yeah, it will continue. It has. I mean, that's how I garnered the sales forecast, the receipts projections, the payables, you have your outstanding aging, et cetera, that I used to do manually. What's best now, the benefits really is everything is integrated in the system. Daily, the AR is being fed in, the deltas of the AR, the deltas of the AP into the system. You could then have those conversations in a more detailed level, and basically it's improving your whole process, not necessarily improving, say, the forecast, although we improved our forecast probably by 20% for the last 6 months since we went live last November, or 6 to 8 months right now. So it's a tool, and that's where people have to understand that AI could help to a certain point, and maybe later on with the technology that will improve more, where hopefully I don't have to work anymore. I won't be I won't be spending. But truthfully, I've probably cut down our department by 40 40 hours a month in terms of daily cash positioning, in terms of the regular day-to-day cash management work and cash forecasting that goes along with it.
So I'm going to throw a final question to Jesper, because one of the reasons why people might use AI is about the ability to integrate different data sources, which if you're working on an Excel model, for example, is probably a little bit more complicated if you're trying to throw lots of different data sets and try and look at relationships. So what have you done so far, and what do you see as the kind of the potential there?
Well, to start from at the end, the potential is basically unlimited. It's I feel a little bit urged to mention that you can actually combine 6 Lego bricks in 950 million different ways. And I feel a little bit the same with cash forecasting data. There was some good questions in the chat. I tried to answer that. Yes, you can add macroeconomic indicators. You can add a lot of different things, but you also need to be aware the more you add, the more difficult it becomes to trace back why did we actually end up wrong. So I really then come back to my boring point about, trying, adding different things, see what works, what does not work. But again, long term, I agree with Gleason. This will make one of our core tasks in Treasury a lot easier for years to come. There's no end to actually things that you can bring in into a cash forecast using AI, but there is just the risk of adding so much complexity that you can't really decouple it anymore and find out why you cash forecast is suddenly off.
So I'm going to wrap there, but I'm going to say thank you so much to everyone for attending. I think my favorite quotes of the day are that the possibilities are unlimited, and the trivia fact that 6 Lego bricks can be 950 million combinations. A big thank you to Clinton, Claudia and Jesper for today's panel, and thank you very much to everyone for attending. Loads of really good questions. I think it's been judging by the smiles that I'm seeing from my colleagues' faces here, I think we've all enjoyed the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. And I want to thank Gleason, Claudia, and Jesper as well for sharing their experience on this topic. I think it's been phenomenal, lots to think about, and I hope you'll stay in touch with our speakers and with James through the platform that I mentioned. We sent the link via the chat. I'm going to ask my colleagues to post it again in case you want to join us and continue the conversation. I also want to thank Deutsche Bank for making this event possible. We wouldn't make it without you. And I also want to thank you all for being here with us. I hope you enjoyed the experience, that you found it enriching, and that you will accompany us again at our next webinar, which will be on in-house banks. So please stay tuned, look out for our emails, and you will be receiving information in the near future. Thank you very much, everyone, again, and hopefully see you soon. Bye-bye.